Reform which merely tinkers or tweaks simply isn't enough. Elon Musk has it right. Agencies must be closed, departments must be gutted, and bureaucrats must be fired. It's such an honor to be here and receive this award. It's particularly so with so many of my heritage colleagues here. I won't embarrass you and ask you to stand, but I will ask, especially given the radical left's unpleasantness of this summer of which we were the target, for everyone else who is here and appreciates your work to give those great warriors a round of applause. I have several board members here too, thank you, and of course, tremendous thanks to my wife, Michelle, who many people have been kind in asking, well, how are you doing? It's been sort of a long summer. Of course, it ended up fine. None of this worked for the radical left. She said, well, I've been married to him for 27 years. I'm sort of used to it by now. But real thanks to our eldest daughter who's here with her husband of 2.5 months, and special thanks to him because I'm not quite sure he knew what he was signing up for. Not with our daughter, who's awesome and perfect, but with everything that's going on. But America is worth it. Our daughter does win the Quip of the Year, though, because a couple of days before their wedding recently, she said, Dad, you know, I love you. I'm glad you're my dad, but I've never been more grateful that my name is soon changing. I wasn't offended. To receive the Encounter Prize for advancing American ideals is truly an honor. The work of my friend Roger Kimball and all his Encounter Books colleagues is truly vital to the future and health of the American Republic. In their fight against what they call the toxic imperatives of political correctness and identity politics, they inoculate us all against the cultural poisons afflicting our nation. To be introduced by my friend and my mentor, Dr. Larry Arnn, is truly beyond humbling, and I must say, rather unbelievable. I'd even call him a hero, were he not from Arkansas. For those of you who think that I'm being impertinent and boorish, you're probably right. As Larry will tell you, I'm from Louisiana, and that's how we are. There are but a few states we have the right to pick on. And no, I'll never get over paying for that one, but it was worth it. But guess what? On behalf of Larry and everyone in Arkansas, thank God for the people of Arkansas and Louisiana and West Virginia and Mississippi, and so many overlooked, derided places filled with millions of deplorable people like Larry and me. Because our people have spoken and we demand our country back right now. We love Donald Trump's Manhattan swagger, but J.D. Vance's Appalachian twang is the clearest sign to us that God is not yet done blessing America. It's that topic, reclaiming this land, that I've come to say a few words about. In fact, I have so many words to say that I recently wrote a book, Dawn's Early Light. I'll give you a preview, but I'll also talk about the dawn itself last Tuesday night. I believe the 2024 presidential election will prove to be the most consequential in at least a generation, maybe even in a century. I say that for two reasons. First, because of the breadth of President Trump's victory, and second, because of the clarity of his agenda. In 2016, as you know, Trump was a new phenomenon in our politics. To many Americans, he was a protest candidate. He fell short in the popular vote. Other than border security and the Supreme Court, his agenda was still a work in progress. People didn't really know what to expect of a Trump presidency. That was not the case this time. The American people knew what a vote for Trump meant, and they cast it decisively. This time, Trump won the popular vote, the first Republican to do so in 20 years and only the second since the end of the Cold War. He won all 7 swing states where this election was really contested, and by larger margins than polls and almost every pollster predicted. He did better than in 2020 in almost every single state, including stunning gains in deep blue strongholds like New York and California. And less than 1 mile from here, Governor Glenn Youngkin's heroic efforts have made Virginia purple again. We conservatives, who tend to entertain worst-case scenario thinking far too often, would do well to see Virginia as the next major opportunity just 11 months from now. Who knows? Maybe Elon and Vivek will be so successful in cutting the federal bureaucracy that Northern Virginia will have far fewer deep state voters. A key dynamic in this new dawn was that Donald Trump won historic support from the white working class and Black and Hispanic Americans, including an outright majority of Latino men. These numbers are unprecedented for a Republican presidential candidate. The only groups Trump did not perform better with compared to 4 years ago are college-educated, wealthy, non-religious Americans, the coastal elites. And President-elect Trump posted these numbers in the face of unprecedented adversity. Not just the typical attack ads and media bias, but impeachments, criminal prosecutions, literal conspiracies hatched at the highest levels of our government, rhetoric so inflammatory that it inspired actual violence, including at least 2 attempted assassinations. Despite all that, President Trump won about 10 million more votes than he did in 2016. And I don't think it's a coincidence that his most successful campaign was also his most substantive. Trump ran on policy. He had a record and an agenda to tear down the woke elite and the corrupt institutions they have weaponized against the American people. The huge multi-ethnic working class majority that stood up on Tuesday night didn't just vote for Donald Trump. This time they voted for Trumpism, a 21st century Jacksonian fusion of populism and conservatism that places ordinary Americans ahead of elites in Washington, New York, and Brussels. And unlike 2016, Trump now has a team of tough, proven, America First professionals ready to execute his plans starting day one. How about those appointments so far? Donald Trump will enter office in January with a transformational agenda, a broad national mandate, and the personnel to carry it out. America hasn't seen anything like this in more than a generation. Which makes sense, because it's the last generation of elite failure, Republican and Democrat, that Trump has been hired to clean up. Their bad trade deals, their cozying up to China, their disastrous foreign policy hubris, their wokeifying of our schools and military, their censorship of dissent and oppression of religious Americans, their open borders and coddling of criminals, their contempt for the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and democracy itself, and their smug condemnation of anyone who disagrees as bitter, deplorable, fascist garbage. I'm looking forward to January 20th. The last 4 years have been the culmination of the elite's generation-long reign of error. As emergencies exploded at home and abroad, their top priority was lying to us about Joe Biden's mental decline and the state of the conflict in Ukraine. Properly understood, our ruling elite is not a social class. It's a criminal conspiracy against the Constitution, against the American people, and against the principle of self-governance itself. That's what the American people put an end to on Tuesday. In putting together this broad coalition, Trump did what no other Republican leader could do. And now he's going to do what no other Republican leader would do: usher in a new golden age of self-governance by putting an everyday American back in charge of this nation. This will be a much harder task than winning an election. It's also one he is much better prepared to take on than he was in 2017. This time, President Trump is not just coming to Washington with good instincts and a list of judges, and those are important. He's bringing the most successful entrepreneur in the world to streamline the administrative state. He's going to expose our compromised public health and food safety agencies to real scientific scrutiny and democratic accountability. He's going to work with Congress to finally expose the Washington establishment's culture of corruption. And when he does, President Trump is also going to show Americans how much liberal elites have been holding us back, and how much our nation can accomplish together if the people are put back in the driver's seat of our government, our economy, and our culture. My recent book, Dawn's Early Light, is about how this new movement President Trump now leads can accomplish that task. About how this movement is different from the Bush, Romney, McConnell Republican Party that failed conservatives for the last 2 decades. And about what a family first, worker first, America first conservatism can do for our future. The book focuses on 5 main policy areas that I believe are essential to restoring America's self-government and essential to cementing conservatives' hard-won victory among working families. First, we must secure the border, end the illegal invasion, and deport the criminal immigrants already here. Moreover, we need to prosecute corporations who knowingly hire illegals and defund the taxpayer-supported NGOs who financed the illegal alien crisis. What will this mean for everyday Americans? Higher wages because of less competition from foreign workers, smaller budget deficits, less crowded schools and hospitals, and of course, safer streets. Second, our education system must be rebuilt, starting by correcting the top-down, top-heavy, federalized education system, and in turn by handing power back to the states, and imagine this, to parents themselves. In the target-rich environment that is the DC bureaucracy, there is no better place to start our pruning than by tearing out, root and branch, the U.S. Department of Education. Americans deserve schools that reinforce capital T truth and teach virtue, honor our country and her heroes, and acknowledge parents' authority as their kids' primary educators. Delivering on those goals will mean more learning, higher test scores, and happier and healthier children. Third, to tell you something you already know, the deep state must go. This malignant fourth branch of government, ruled by Marxist activists we don't elect and have heretofore not fired, is un-American. These tenured elites are not experts serving the public interest. They have accrued power unconstitutionally, abetted by a complacent Congress, at the expense of the ordinary Americans who told us last week that the gig is up. Whether you're talking about the education department forcing girls to shower with boys, or illegally forcing blue-collar workers to pay off PhD student loans, or the Federal Emergency Management Agency denying disaster relief aid to families with Trump Vance signs in their yard, or the FBI targeting daily churchgoers and parents as domestic terrorists. Reform which merely tinkers or tweaks simply isn't enough. Elon Musk has it right. Agencies must be closed, departments must be gutted, and bureaucrats must be fired. We shouldn't be looking to cut billions, but trillions of dollars from the federal footprint. In the book, I compare this work to a controlled burn in one of our great western forests. This metaphor applied figuratively, of course, to our agencies and institutions is instructive. A controlled burn destroys the dangerous deadwood so that the whole forest can flourish. In Washington terms, that looks like dismantling a few of the most corrupt agencies so that our government works for the American people again instead of the other way around. Fundamentally, this work is not anti-government, but pro-America. Just as a controlled burn in the forest brings new growth, a controlled burn inside the deep state will spur a long overdue economic renaissance, new jobs and business startups, new investment in domestic supply chains, new homes and infrastructure, rising wages, and falling inflation. It will, in short, create the conditions for the economy that finally rebuild the middle class. Fourth, reviving American self-government means restoring strategic self-interest and realism to our foreign policy. Washington's messianic hubris of recent decades has destabilized the world, endangered our people, and bankrupted our nation. As we fix our military, which Pete Hegseth will do, we also need to recalibrate it to defend our homeland, our people, and our vital interests. Doing so will save money and lives while promoting international responsibility, peace, and prosperity. Finally, we need to pursue all of the above and more with a single goal in mind: improving the lives of America's working families. Bad left-wing policy on immigration, education, regulation, welfare, and much else is the reason young couples across the country can't afford to get married, can't buy homes, can't afford to start families in safe neighborhoods with good schools, can't put dinner on their table. This is what as I explained in the book, called cost disease socialism, which discourages work and marriage. It penalizes parents, children, and stay-at-home moms. And frankly, it encourages unsustainable debt, both for families and for our nation. It's one of the main reasons too many Americans are addicted to screens, pornography, opioids, and gambling. Washington seems to be at war with all of the sources of human flourishing: family, community, religion, and work. And we wonder why we're in the middle of a national mental health crisis. We need to fix all of that. And trust me, Washington is not the answer, and we can. We can put the federal government back on the side of the hardworking families and patriotic values that the uniparty elite has been abusing for a generation. As we gather today, Washington is still trying to process the magnitude of President Trump's victory last week. Everyone is parsing the data, trying to decipher what the numbers mean. K Street is scrambling wildly, which is always a sign that we're winning. But I think the story of last Tuesday is simple if we have the eyes to see it. As I discuss in the book, the American people actually like America. They want to make her great again. They want to wake up in a normal country. And they want a government that actually likes the American people. One that serves rather than bullies their communities. One that honors rather than condemns their values. One that obeys rather than circumvents the Constitution. What we need to accomplish this is nothing more or less than the kind of government we, the people, have been promised as our birthright since 1776. Starting on January 20th, the new conservative movement has the chance to deliver on that and change Washington and America forever. In closing, last Tuesday was the dawn of a new era, and by that dawn's still early light, we can already see the prosperous, happier future it portends, a future the American people deserve. Our host this evening, Roger Kimball, said it well a few years ago when in a speech for Hillsdale College, fittingly, he said, In the great battle between the partisans of freedom and the inebriates of virtue, freedom is ultimately negotiable until it rouses itself to fight back. At stake is nothing less than the survival of our common history. My friend, from your lips to God's ears, once again, the American people have spoken. Whether establishment Washington listens is an open question that we, the people, get to answer in the months and years ahead. Should we be up to the task, then the American future is entirely ours. Thank you once again, and God bless you.
The Kevin Roberts Show is brought to you by more than 10 million supporters of the Heritage Foundation. The executive producer is Crystal Kate Bonham. Sound design by Lauren Evans, Mark Guiney, Tim Kennedy, and Joseph Fonsbakowski. For more information and to subscribe, please visit heritage.org.